Good evening, you're watching World News Tonight on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Denmark's Prime Minister is tonight urging allies to take Donald Trump seriously over his threats to annex Greenland. This as the US President again sets its sights on the autonomous Danish territory and insists on American dominance in the Western Hemisphere, just days after striking Venezuela. More in just a moment, but first, the latest headlines. Could America's control of Venezuelan oil strike at the heart of Russia's economy? Footage released by Finnish authorities shows the dramatic capture of a ship suspected of cable sabotage. And a foreign policy dilemma for Viktor Orban as Hungary's parliamentary election inches closer. European leaders are standing firm tonight in the wake of another Donald Trump threat to take over the autonomous Danish territory of Greenland. The US president eyeing up the world's largest island after hitting Venezuela on Saturday morning, saying it's needed for national security. But Denmark and its allies are hitting back, with the country's Prime Minister saying everything stops if the United States attacks a fellow NATO country. Natalia Komarov reports.
You know what Denmark did recently to boost up security in Greenland? They added one more dog sled. It's true. They thought that was a great move.
Since last weekend's successful operation in Caracas, Donald Trump has been naming potential future targets of US intervention. And once again, he repeated,
"We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And the European Union needs us to have it, and they know that."
The Prime Minister of Greenland responded,
"That is not how you speak to people who have repeatedly demonstrated accountability, stability and loyalty. Enough is enough. No more pressure, no more insinuations, no more fantasies about annexation."
The Danish Prime Minister warned that Trump's threats should be treated seriously.
If the United States attacks another NATO country, everything stops.
Leaders of Baltic and Nordic states expressed support for Greenland's sovereignty and were quickly joined by nearly all top European officials.
Well, the future of Greenland is for Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark. And for Greenland and the future of Denmark only.
Greenland is an ally to the US and is also covered by the NATO alliance.
The Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, when contacted by TVP World, reiterated its previously expressed position.
Naturally, Poland supports the territorial integrity of the Kingdom of Denmark.
The United States has had a military base in Greenland since the Second World War, and the island is fully integrated into NATO.
The problem with Donald Trump in this regard is he doesn't believe in alliances.
Donald Trump is also quite famously an unpredictable president, and after recent successes, he might feel emboldened.
What Russia's probably really cheering for and watching for is the United States and Trump now shifting his focus back to Greenland.
While on board Air Force One, Trump has asked reporters to circle back to the Greenland issue in 2 months or 20 days. For TVP World, Natalia Komarov.
Over in Caracas, the dust is settling following America's nighttime arrest of Nicolas Maduro, with Washington appointing Maduro's deputy, Delcy Rodriguez, as interim president as long as she plays ball. In fact, President Trump has again insisted that he's in charge in his bid to reassert the 19th century Monroe Doctrine and keep foreign powers out of Latin America. Paweł Trzaskowski has more.
As Nicolas Maduro and his wife were flown today to New York to appear at Manhattan Federal Court, where they pled not guilty, and the UN Security Council gathered to discuss the legality of the US operation in Caracas, the dust still hasn't settled in Venezuela after his deposition. Uncertainty prevails on the streets as groups of Maduro supporters, some of them armed, rally in the streets.
We don't want them to impose a Yankee government on us. We are free and sovereign.
But the country's new interim head of state, former Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, has tentatively pledged to play ball with Washington.
We prioritize moving towards balanced and respectful international relations between the United States and Venezuela. We invite the US government to collaborate with us on an agenda of cooperation.
However, Washington has been less diplomatic.
Don't ask me who's in charge, because I'll give you an answer and it'll be very controversial.
What does that mean?
It means we're in charge.
The US in charge of Venezuela
does destabilize and create a lot of unease around the world, because this is just the beginning of what he is going to do geopolitically.
What Trump is doing geopolitically has already been clearly spelled out.
Monroe doctrines.
This revived 200-year-old doctrine means the US will aim to reassert its dominance in the Western Hemisphere, with Venezuela being just the first step.
Mexico, I think, is next on the hit list. This year, Trump will, in light of the Venezuelan situation, I think he will end up with sending American troops or special ops into Mexico.
And Mexico is already closing ranks.
Mexico firmly believes that the Americas do not belong to any doctrine or power.
But it's not the only country in Washington's crosshairs.
Cuba is ready to fall, you know. Yes. Cuba looks like it's ready to fall. Colombia is very sick too, run by a sick man.
The Colombian president has already responded that he's willing to take up arms to defend his country. But Trump naming the next targets makes other leaders in the region equally nervous.
Today it's Venezuela, but tomorrow it could be anyone else.
That's why the governments of Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Uruguay, Mexico and Spain expressed in a joint statement deep concern over attempts at governmental external administration. But this concern is unlikely to deter the US Navy still stationed in the Caribbean.
So the US has a massive naval and military capability, and they could use that in a number of ways.
Paweł Trzaskowski for TVP World.
And we'll break all of this down in an exclusive interview with retired Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, former commander of US Army Europe and Africa. As the United States temporarily assumes control of the largest proven oil reserves on the planet, the Kremlin will be watching every step. As Maciej Wilowski reports, American influence could ramp up production levels, bring down fuel prices and hit Russia in the pocket.
Rising U.S. influence in oil-rich Venezuela could help unleash the country's energy potential. Despite having the world's biggest known reserves of oil, an estimated 300 billion barrels, or roughly 17% of the world's total, the country is producing far below its maximum potential.
Venezuela is producing far less, about a third basically, about 1 million barrels per day, compared to their capacity, which was observable about 15 years ago or so, of about 3 million barrels per day.
Hours after Maduro's capture on Saturday, U.S. President Donald Trump pledged new American investments into Venezuela's oil sector.
We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country.
Higher production could boost the supply of oil from Venezuela to the global market, helping to bring down fuel prices.
If you have more ample supply from Venezuela and other countries, you could see this price going down even to around $40 per Brent.
This would have negative consequences for Russia, which relies heavily on revenue from the export of hydrocarbons.
Having Russian-grade Urals trading around $40 per barrel already, you could see it going to almost $30 per barrel. It is not providing sufficient funds for Kremlin.
In addition to lowering the price of oil, a greater U.S. presence in Venezuela could redirect energy flows in the region toward the U.S.
Historically, most of Venezuela's exports have gone to China and other countries willing to work around sanctions, mainly Russia as well. So great U.S. involvement could redirect some flows towards the U.S.
When it comes to Venezuela, Russia and China's loss is the United States' gain. Maciej Wilowski for TVP World.
At least 2 civilians are dead in the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv after drones set a medical facility ablaze and Russia targeted homes and critical infrastructure. At the same time, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is finalising his war cabinet reshuffle, naming a new security service chief and enlisting an economic advisor from Canada. For more, let's go live to Kyiv, where our correspondent Oz Chatterjee is standing by. Good evening, Oz. Another big day and night in the capital. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, 2 people killed, 4 others injured. 1 killed at a hospital where the injured also took place. That's a 4-story hospital, private hospital in the Obolonsky district of Kyiv. 25 other people had to be evacuated from the building after it was struck. 1 other person, a 75-year-old man, killed in the Kyiv region, not Kyiv, the city itself, after Russia launched 165 drones into Ukrainian territory. President Zelenskyy making clear what he thinks the message Russia is sending, saying Russia does not take seriously the diplomatic efforts that civilized countries are trying to pursue with it. Russia is dragging out the war and trying to inflict as much damage on Ukraine as possible. Their strategy is unchanged. So it's clear that the Ukrainians are sensing that Russia is definitely trying to send a message to Ukraine with these continued attacks on civilian infrastructure. As these talks are escalating, you know, Ukraine is having more talks this week, next week. So very important high-level discussions are taking place. And Russia is responding with actions rather than having more words around a negotiating table with the United States. Kyiv will be hoping that President Trump can see the same thing that the Ukrainian government sees. Now, with regards to the Ukrainian government, President Zelenskyy continuing his reshuffle. The head of the security services of Ukraine, Vasyl Malyuk, he stood down following some political pressure by Zelenskyy. That in the lead up to this, people thought that that Zelenskyy was going to fire him. He eventually jumped before he was pushed. That's according to reports in the media. So, look, it's a difficult position for the Ukrainian government to be in right now, politically, diplomatically, militarily. So Zelenskyy seeing fit to reshuffle the cabinet. Another important addition to his cabinet is the appointment of Chrystia Freeland, the former Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, now being brought on board as an economic advisor to the Ukrainian government by Zelenskyy. So potentially a canny move, looking towards further support from the West with this appointment, particularly one to try and bring Ukraine closer to Western norms with regards to the economy and potentially corruption. So it'll be interesting to see how this appointment develops with regards to Zelensky's cabinet. But yeah, look, all change here as Zelenskyy continues to shuffle around the people in his top team.
Oz Chatterjee, our correspondent in Kyiv, thank you. Moving to Latvia now, where police are investigating damage to an underwater telecommunications cable in the Baltic Sea. The region has faced a string of suspected sabotage attacks, with Finnish authorities seizing a cargo vessel headed from Russia to Israel last week, accusing the ship of dragging its anchor over a line running from the Gulf of Finland to Estonia. Our defence correspondent Susanna Jurek has more.
You may be inclined to think that these are scenes from another installment of Mission Impossible, but in fact, this is the raid which the Finnish border guard carried out on a Russia-linked vessel, accused of damaging submarine telecommunication cables between Finland and Estonia on December 31st. On Monday, the Latvian Prime Minister also stated that another telecommunication cable in the Baltic has been damaged, this time further down south.
Damage to an optical cable belonging to a private company has been detected in the Baltic Sea near Liepāja. The state police has launched an investigation, with the circumstances currently being clarified.
Incidents just like these first gained prominence in November of 2024, including the now infamous cutting of the S-Link 2 cable, damage suspected of being caused by the Kremlin-linked oil tanker Eagle S. The crew were unsuccessfully tried in October, with the court case being dismissed due to Finland lacking jurisdiction, and the captain continuing to deny intentional damage.
Something the shadow fleet or some illegal cargoes or something which is the absolutely bullshit and incorrect.
If you want to ban an individual vessel from sailing your waters, you have to have specific you have to have specific points that vessel is violating. And that's what countries in the Baltic Sea have been trying to do.
And as prevention is better than treatment, the NATO alliance initiated the Baltic Sentry surveillance mission in January 2025. At the same time, countries in the region also stepped up with their own strategies for deterrence.
Part of the time they are providing close protection. They accompany a single vessel or stay nearby so that if any threats arise, these warships are able to respond to the threats and carry out defensive actions.
But as the sabotage attacks continue, questions have also begun to emerge about the need for potentially more symmetric responses. Yet, as experts warn,
if you, as a Western country, use the same methods as a rule-breaking country like Russia, then it's a race to the bottom.
For now, however, surveillance, which proved effective in the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, may be the best way to reduce Russian presence in the Baltic. For TVP World, Zuzanna Jurek.
Hungary's Viktor Orban is heading into the new year with a foreign policy headache. On one hand, Budapest was the only EU capital to recognise Nicolás Maduro's election as Venezuelan president. On the other, Orban prides himself on his ties with Donald Trump. And closer to home, a new law passed in Slovakia by his ally Robert Fico has ignited this year's election campaign as it reportedly targets the country's Hungarian minority. Our correspondent, Andrew Sweeney, has more.
They now call it the Monroe Document, I don't know.
US President Donald Trump's twist on the Monroe Doctrine has caused a foreign policy headache for Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Orban prides himself on his close links with President Trump, but Hungary also maintained links with Venezuela's Nicolás Maduro. In 2023, Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó visited Caracas to meet with Maduro. He visited Belarus the same year and Moscow last November. Orban has also refused to sign an EU statement voicing caution over Maduro's capture.
This would mirror what the Slovak Prime Minister did. He did actually condemn the US attack more abstractly, avoiding mentioning Donald Trump specifically.
The Prime Minister has rejected comparisons between Trump's intervention in Venezuela and Russia's invasion of Ukraine, saying it was good for energy markets and doubled down on opposing EU funds for Kyiv.
We will not give Hungarians money to Ukraine. Hungary will not take part in war loans or financial aid sent to Ukraine, and we will not send soldiers or weapons. We will mobilize our economic resources for Hungarians and Hungarian families.
Orban's foreign problems hit close to home too. His Slovak counterpart and ally, Robert Fico, recently brought in legislation that critics say targets the country's Hungarian minority. Peter Magyar, whose TISA party is leading the polls for April's parliamentary elections, said he could expel Slovakia's ambassador if elected as Hungary's Prime Minister.
If we cannot diplomatically get this disgraceful legislation repealed, we will ask the Slovakian ambassador Pavlo Pavlis to leave Hungary.
With those elections less than 100 days away, a challenge to Orban's credentials as a Hungarian nationalist could be hard to face. For TVP World, Andrew Sweeney.
And joining me now for an exclusive interview is retired Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, former commander of US Army Europe. Good evening to you, Lieutenant General.
Hey, Aaron.
We're hearing much from Donald Trump about this 19th century Monroe Doctrine, about America ruling its region. In your mind, what does this mean for the Baltic states, for the likes of Poland and Europe at large?
Well, of course, what happened over the weekend is a manifestation of the new national security strategy put out by the Trump administration back in November, which basically implies that there will be spheres of influence, and that for the United States, its sphere of influence would be the Western Hemisphere. The new national security strategy also says that Western democracies are the threat, and that Europe is pretty much on its own, and it never has anything negative to say about Russia, which is also remarkable. So I think what we're seeing is the manifestation of the Trump administration doing what he has talked about for some time, which is to leave Europeans to themselves. And I think this is going to be a disaster for the United States, because our own economic interests are tied to Europe's economic interests, and our best and most reliable allies, who we always need, are in Europe. So I'm concerned about this direction.
And by striking Venezuela, by claiming power and might in the Western Hemisphere, like you say, a manifestation of that national security document, has the United States also given the likes of Russia and China free rein in their own patches, those spheres of influence you mentioned? I mean, is Washington saying, stay away from us, but otherwise do as you please?
I think that's pretty close to, I think, how the president believes, he and his team. Now, of course, Russia does not need any justification to do what it does. It attacked Ukraine 12 years ago. It's been conducting gray zone operations against Poland and other countries in Central and Eastern Europe long before the Trump administration came into power. So Russia may cite this or use this somehow, but this is not going to motivate them to do something that they are not already doing. China may be a little bit different in that as they look at Taiwan and they see that the United States not only is willing to use force to remove a head of government, but they also have been watching the United States over the past year during the so-called negotiations with the Russians, where the Trump administration appears to be pretty flexible about things like sovereignty. That's not good. That's not good for Ukraine or Europe, but it's also not good for Taiwan or the Philippines. So it's early, but I think the Trump administration has sent a very dangerous signal with what it's doing in Venezuela.
And what about Ukraine? I mean, almost 30 heads of state will meet in Paris tomorrow as part of the coalition of the willing. The Élysée Palace telling us tonight that Caracas and Kyiv are barely linked. Do you agree with that, or is that diplomatic speak? Will what has played out in Venezuela have a really consequential bearing on how America moves forward when it comes to Ukraine and Russia?
It's hard for me to know for sure. What's good is that these nations, European nations, are coming together, and I think that they're realizing that the Trump administration does not appear to really care significantly about Ukraine, except from perhaps a business standpoint. All the pressure from the Trump administration has been on the Ukrainians, not on the Russians. But at least the U.S. seems to be willing to continue to provide weapons and that sort of thing through sales to Ukraine or to other European countries. What I can't tell is the connection between this new strategy and Ukraine. I think our allies are understandably very concerned that not only has the administration now gone after Maduro in Venezuela, they talk openly about Cuba, and it may be more alarming, they talk openly about Greenland, with the president saying in 2 months, we're going to take care of this. And this is a real problem because obviously, as you and your viewers know, Greenland is the territory of Denmark, a NATO ally, which means that any orders to conduct operations against Greenland would be by definition illegal orders because it would be violating the Washington Treaty. So this is a problem that I hope the Congress finally steps up, performs their constitutional duty, and prevents the administration from doing something that would be very reckless with very significant long-term damage to our security as well as to our allies.
You mentioned Greenland. I mean, are European leaders on their way to a reckoning? I mean, will European leaders eventually face a choice? Stick with the continent's allies, stick with losing Washington's interest in military backing, or side with the United States and lose political face and potentially, in the case of Greenland, even territorial ground?
I saw the other day Garry Kasparov said, you either have a sphere of influence or you are in someone else's sphere of influence. And this is where we are with Europe. Europe for too long has assumed that the United States would provide all of its protection. And so European nations failed to do what they needed to do as well as depending on Russia for energy. And so now we're at a situation where Russia clearly is the enemy, and maybe the United States. And it hurts me bad to say this, having been a NATO officer and a U.S. Army officer for almost 40 years, but maybe we're not seen as reliable anymore. And so European countries are going to have to accept responsibility for their own security. I think we, the U.S., we're going to regret this for a long time, the lost trust. And at some point, European countries may even say, okay, you cannot have access here or bases here, things like that. I hope not, but that's something that I can foresee. At the end of the day, Europe should, let me put it this way, the United States spent zillions of dollars and decades helping Europe after the war. And I'm very proud and glad that we did it. Now, I think we're in a situation where the United States needs Europe to help us, to save us from ourselves, to stand tough against this administration, but don't assume that this is America forever now. We do have midterm elections coming up in November. And so I hope European nations will stand firm, be tough, but don't lose hope in your American ally.
We're running out of time, but given your military experience and expertise, do you believe that Donald Trump could send troops into Greenland and take over Greenland?
Well, certainly. I used to think, I was dismissed it like this is ridiculous. There's no need to. The Danes and the Greenlanders have welcomed us. So I thought there's no way he would do it. But after this weekend, it now seems more plausible. And I think he seems interested in doing something with theater like this versus just saying, okay, thanks a lot. This, in my view, would be an illegal order to the U.S. military. And I hope that they will look at it that way.
Lastly, Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen says, quote, if the United States attacks another NATO country, then everything stops. I mean, we've spent months talking about Article 5, about Washington's commitment right here on this very program. Is Donald Trump not just threatening Greenland, but threatening to shatter the NATO alliance?
Well, the alliance is based on collective defense and a set of values. There's a reason nations have always wanted to join NATO, even though it's never been perfect. That threat is still there. Whether or not the United States is seen as a reliable member of the alliance, I think it would be a disaster for all of us, all the members of NATO, if somehow this was seen as the end of NATO, although clearly this is severely damaging. This is a dream scenario for the Russians.
Retired Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, thank you, as always, for your time.
Thanks, Aaron.
And that's all for World News Tonight. Do stay with us here on TVP World for more. I'm Aaron Darman. Good night.